Good morning and welcome to Beacon Academy's Remembrance event. My name is Sam Hode, and as a member of the Air Cadets, it is my honour to open today's ceremony on behalf of our school. 2020 has been a very different year for all of us, and I am pleased we can still join together to remember those who fought for our country. I invite you now to join us as we listen to a short talk from our Head of History, Mrs. Kennedy.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Kennedy, the Head of History. In Mr. Braidwood's assembly, he spoke about the global nature of war, that it affects many people in many different contexts, and he also started to talk about how soldiers' graves are preserved as an act of remembrance. I remember when I was younger, remembrance felt like an overwhelming thing. So many soldiers have died in just the last 100 years. From the First World War and the Second World War, to the Arab-Israeli conflict, to the war in Afghanistan and much more recent terrorist attacks, it can seem an overwhelming prospect to try to remember everyone who has given up their lives so that we can live in the society we do today. It can also seem like a far-off prospect, war. We are fortunate enough to not know what living through a world war is. However, there are still soldiers in the army today, and I hope that what I can do is focus us down on just a few soldiers' stories to give us something to think about in the next 2 minutes silence. When you think of war graves, maybe you think of pictures such as Tyne Cot in Ypres. There is a serene nature about the cemetery, beautifully presented with rows of brilliant white headstones, neatly mowed grass and pristine flowers. At the site of most of the battles in Belgium, these cemeteries are fully funded so that they can remain a place of remembrance. Unfortunately, they are not all fully funded, and some war graves will fall into disrepair. You can see on the screen the grave of Sergeant Instructor Onley. Today is a day of national remembrance, but some choose to honour those who have died in battle through the year. This man to the right is a former soldier, 3rd Battalion of the Royal Green Jackets, and was a soldier in the 1970s. 3 years ago, he was attending a christening in Sandhurst when he came across an overgrown war grave of an 18-year-old rifleman who had died just 6 weeks before the end of the war. The next day, he decided to go back and care for the grave and restore it, and since then he has restored over 70 graves. He now works with a local historian to connect families with forgotten war graves, and this is my husband's uncle, Steve Davies. You may not know anyone personally who has been a part of war, but remembering, researching and listening to stories will hopefully widen your world a little bit. It's very easy for us all to live our lives without thinking of the impact people you have never met have had on your life. Take this week to ask questions to your relatives of their own experiences. Read the plaques of remembrance you may pass every day on your way to school, and make remembrance an active part of your life. One last thing I'd like to talk to you about is the many different places soldiers can do and the jobs that they can complete. Sometimes when we think of soldiers, we think of fighting on the front line. But you could have been in the Royal Air Force and fly planes, you could have been collecting information on battle strategy, or you could have been in the Navy. This is the HMS Implacable, which was stationed in the Pacific during World War II. It was used as an aircraft carrier, so many planes on board, and completed attacks against the Japanese during the war. And this is Leslie Jack Morris. He was a petty officer on board the HMS Implacable. He was a navigator and so plotted positions and dealt with radar. He joined the war when he was 17, underage, because he wanted to see the world. He kept pictures of everywhere he went, and when he returned home in 1946, he put those photographs into a scrapbook. And when he died in 2012, he left that scrapbook to his granddaughter, me. He joined underage because he wanted to serve with his friends. As you can see from one of the photographs in the scrapbook, this was true of many soldiers who went off to war with people in their local areas. Being stationed in the Pacific, the Implacable was the first ship to land in Hiroshima after the dropping of the atomic bomb in Japan that ended the war. He was given a camera and told to take photographs. In the scrapbook, he writes of the devastation that nothing was left. Soldiers fight in wars so that hopefully this level of destruction can never be seen again. When the war ended, he couldn't just go back home. One of his jobs was to release prisoners of war, from Japan and helped them find their way home. He did this for over a year, and here you can see the Christmas card he sent his parents in 1945. Hopefully what these stories have shown you is that soldiers take on all sorts of responsibilities all over the world. It's important for us to remember those who have given their lives through years of service so that we can live in a more peaceful world today. This week we remember those people as well as people who continue to serve and protect us. Thank you for listening to my stories, and I'll now hand you over to Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy, for such personal but also really pertinent and relevant examples from your truly interesting family history. And I also want to extend my thanks this morning to Mr. Braidwood from our history department for his poignant and reflective assembly, and to thank our wonderful students Sam, Beth, Charlie and Ethan as well for being part of this. My name is Anna Robinson, and for those of you that are joining us from the wider community, I'm the head teacher of Beacon Academy. I would really like to welcome those who have joined us remotely from Sir Henry Fermer, St Mary's Catholic Primary, St John's Church of England School, the Royal British Legion in Crowborough, Air Cadets 1414 Crowborough Squadron, 1st Crowborough Scout Group, All Saints Church and Steve, in particular the Vicar, welcome, Crowborough Town Council, Crowborough Live, Crowborough Magazine, Times of Tunbridge Wells, our parents and carers who are able to join us this morning, and any additional members of the public as well. It's also obviously really sad that we can't be on Chapel Green where we normally are, and there will be a few members of staff and a few of our students as well there, mixing in with our primary schools and members of the community, but this is a very welcome alternative, and I also think it's really positive that our whole school community can join in this morning. So Remembrance Day is obviously observed on this day in most countries to recall the hostilities of war. It's a chance to keep in mind and acknowledge the courage and sacrifice of those who served their countries. And it's also a time to recognise that as future generations, we have a responsibility to work relentlessly for the peace that they fought so hard to achieve. They died for their families and friends, for their homes, and they died for us. Our future is their monument. And with our 2-minute silence approaching, it's also important too to remember that 2 minutes to remember the fallen is never too much to ask. And this week in our tutor time, we've shown a really short video clip that was produced by the British Legion, and those sentiments that came out via that clip were a really clear reminder of why giving our time, especially in the 21st century, is just as important as it's ever been. And their message, which I'm going to be recapping, is clear and current, and it resonates. So let's break the silence on the 2-minute silence and pause. You see, it's not about which side of the argument that you side with. Think of it as an act of kindness. You may not know their names, you may never meet them face to face, but imagine what it must feel like never again to see the face of your brother, your sister, your parents or your best friend. Imagine all that you had left was the pictures that they'd left on their social media, or only a backpack full of their belongings. This is more than some war in your history textbook. You do not have to agree with the politicians, you don't have to like their decisions, but you can decide to empathise. And yes, it can be awkward, just standing there. But try this. Try closing your eyes and remember those who risk their lives knowing that every second might be their last. So if we give them a second or 2 minutes, is that really too much to ask? Let that football roll to a stop. Let your conversations reach a full stop. Mute your phone, close your laptop, pause your coffee, switch off your TV. Because when it comes to empathy, we can all stand on the front line. And on the 11th of November at 11 AM, we can all choose to unite. We need to talk about the silence and then pause, lest we forget. This moment is ours.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, for those very moving words. My name is Miss Miller and I'm the Head of Personal Development here at Beacon Academy. I would now like to invite members of our student leadership team to read In Flanders Field. This will be followed by a playing of The Last Post and then our 2-minute silence.
In Flanders Field by John McCrae. In Flanders field, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still singing bravely fly, scarce heard amid the guns below.
We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunsets glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields.
Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. These words truly reflect the great sacrifice made by so many to give us the liberty that we have today. They also remind us of the countless soldiers who suffered separation from their families and loved ones as they went off to fight. COVID-19 restrictions bring a very different type of remembrance this year, with much smaller ceremonies and people across the country being encouraged to remember the fallen on their own. We know how difficult this year has been, and this does not exclude our war veterans who would normally be out selling poppies to raise money for the British Legion and their families. Should you not have been able to buy a poppy this year and would still like to donate, you can do so by texting poppy followed by your donation to 70545. We are so pleased that, whilst not physically together, we could gather virtually. Remembering those we have sadly lost during the pandemic also plays a part this year, as we give thanks to the Armed Forces and NHS for protecting our national life. All in all, it feels even more crucial today in 2020 and on Remembrance Day to take the opportunity to pay tribute to all those who risk their lives and continue to do so in service of our country. Thank you for joining us today, and from all of us here at Beacon, we wish you a safe and enjoyable day.